This is Sean Radcliff. Welcome to another episode of Preservation Oaks. In this series, we introduce you to professionals from museums, cultural, genealogical, and historical societies across the United States. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. Good day, everyone. Thanks for being here. We have a great program for you today. In this episode, we are honored to welcome Mr. Garth Kriewall. Garth Kriewall, now retired, dedicates time and expertise as a communications volunteer for the Port Hope Area Historical Society. Established in 2020, the Port Hope Area Historical Society is committed to the preservation of the rich culture and heritage of the Port Hope community and the thumb of Michigan. Their mission is to unearth, gather, and safeguard any artifacts or records that contribute to the understanding and depiction of the history of rural Michigan, specifically Port Hope and its surroundings. Additionally, they strive to make these collected materials accessible to all who seek knowledge of the community's past. Furthermore, the Society endeavors to share historical insights and narratives to foster a deeper appreciation for the origins and development of the Port Hope community. The Port Hope Area Historical Society is doing something very exciting, which we'll talk more about with Garth. They're building the future of preserving and telling the story of their history. From everything I've read and the pictures I've seen, they're really working hard to renovate a historic lumberyard and combine other local area efforts into a collaborative, cohesive plan for historic preservation and awareness within the area. Hey, I'm Sean Radcliff, and I'm coming to you from Salt Lake City, and this is Preservation Oaks, the original talk program on MicroStream Radio, where we feature information about museums, cultural and heritage institutions, associations, historical and genealogical societies, and history-focused media creators across the United States. By the way, our main platform is preservationoaks.podbean.com, but you can find us on nearly all podcast platforms, as well as Rumble, Getter, Minds, TikTok, Facebook, Odyssey, and YouTube. So wherever you listen to the program, I appreciate it very much when you like, comment, follow, or subscribe. If you're interested in being a guest on our program, or if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us at preservationoaks@gmail.com. We're incredibly grateful when you spread the word about our program to your friends, colleagues, and beyond. Your support in expanding our audience helps shine a light on the unsung heroes of Preservation Oaks, bringing them the recognition they deserve. Thank you for helping us raise awareness. Unlike many podcasts, we don't seek financial contributions from our listeners at all. We make no money. We do this work to recognize these wonderful organizations and to allow them to share the excellent work they're doing within their communities. So we simply ask for your help in sharing our program and helping it grow. In our society today, we often celebrate those who entertain us with their performances on screen and at the movies. They captivate us with their ability to become someone else, earning substantial paychecks and prestigious awards for their talents. But the individuals featured on our podcast are not acting. They're the real-life heroes. They dedicate themselves to protecting, preserving, and educating others about our history every day. These individuals are the backbone of our nation, and it's crucial and critical that we support their efforts. They work tirelessly to safeguard our heritage, ensuring that future generations can learn and appreciate our past. The true preservation of our history and culture happens at the local level through the dedication of museums, historical and genealogical associations, and societies. So we urge you to promote this podcast and support your local society. Together we can ensure that our rich heritage is preserved for generations to come. And I'd like to thank you very much for your support. On our next episode of Preservation Oaks, we meet with Ms. Joanne Miller and Mr. Darren Steffen from the Hillsdale County Historical Society located in Hillsdale, Michigan. The purpose of the Hillsdale County Historical Society is to preserve, advance, and disseminate knowledge of the history of Hillsdale County, Michigan. All right, that being said, let's get this show snapping. Our historical May events for this episode. On May 1st, 1883, Buffalo Bill Cody put on his first Wild West show. On May 7, 1998, Apple Computer unveiled the first iMac. On May 8, 1886, Coca-Cola was invented. On May 10, 1869, the first transcontinental railroad connecting the eastern and western United States was completed. On May 10, 1872, Victoria Woodhull was the first woman nominated for President of the United States. On May 10, 1908, Mother's Day was observed for the first time. On May 10, 1924, J. Edgar Hoover becomes the director of the FBI. On May 14, 1804, the Lewis and Clark expedition departed on its historical journey. On May 14, 1973, Skylab, the United States' first space station, was launched. Thank you to www.ducksters.com for this episode's historic events. Let's drink some tea, some Twinings tea. Good tea, and I love Twinings tea. Okay, here's a short bio of today's guest, Garth Kriewall, a man whose life's journey weaves a rich tapestry of experiences rooted in the heartland of eastern Michigan. Born and raised in Port Hope, Garth Kriewall's childhood was imbued with a rustic charm and hard work synonymous with farm life. It was here that his deep-seated values of community, perseverance, and communication began to take root. Educated locally, Garth attended high school in Port Hope. His graduating class numbered 20. He later studied at Ferris State University in Michigan, where he earned an associate degree in journalism and a bachelor's degree in public administration. Building upon this, Garth pursued further academic excellence at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where he earned a master's degree in journalism. Throughout his career, spanning some 44 years, Garth wore many hats, each emblematic of his passion for communication and community service. From his editorial roles at the Times-Herald newspaper in Port Huron to his tenure as an editorial cartoonist at the Grand Rapids Business Journal, Garth's penmanship and editorial acumen left an indelible mark. Beyond the realms of journalism, Garth's commitment to education and community development shone brightly through his role as communications supervisor at the St. Clair County Regional Educational Service Agency and as a trustee on the Port Huron Area School District Board of Education. His dedication to preserving local history and heritage is evident in his numerous volunteer, officer, and board member positions. Notably, he served as a board member of the Port Huron Museum of Arts and History, further solidifying his legacy as a custodian of the area's history and culture. A multifaceted communicator, Garth's talents transcended print media as evidenced by his guest appearances on local radio programs where his voice resonated with listeners far and wide. On this episode, as we meet and chat with Garth Kriewall, we'll talk about the Port Area Historical Society through the eyes of someone who has a great deal of depth of experience, a wealth of knowledge, and strong communication skills. We're lucky to have him with us, and I'm really excited by the work they're doing in Port Hope to preserve their history and chart a course into the future. All right. Welcome to the program, Garth.
Hello, Sean.
Yeah. Port Hope is nestled in what local people refer to as the Thumb of Michigan, which is situated on the northeastern side of the state near the Canadian border. This charming town overlooks the picturesque shoreline of Lake Huron and is home to around 300 residents. Garth, I couldn't help notice your enthusiastic posts about the food at Buck's Cafe on Main Street in Port Hope. It sounds really
It,
delicious.
it's a diner, but these are people who know how to run diners, and it's great. They took a flyer, renovated an old building that had been in and out as a diner for 50 years or more, and people are paying attention. So it's just added amazing life to a small town.
Hey, also, I spotted a hotel on Main Street that seems to cater to fishermen visiting the area. Is fishing the primary attraction drawing tourists to Port Hope?
It's one of them. I think primarily it's the ambiance, it's the quiet, it's the rural community, and there are in the water. Just not so much fishing necessarily, but just people spend hours just staring at the water.
It's beautiful, it really is. Can you share with us some interesting facts about the history of Port Hope, Michigan that many people might not know?
I don't think there are many facts that anybody knows about Port Hope, Michigan. It's a town of fewer than 300 people. Well, first of all, let me orient you, okay, Sean? I
Yep.
mean, you take your right hand and
Okay.
turn it palms up.
All right.
So you're staring at your hand. Down at the lower right near the wrist is Detroit. And if you're not from the Midwest, Detroit is maybe about all you know about Michigan. At the tip of your index finger is the Mackinac Bridge that connects the lower peninsula of Michigan to the upper peninsula. If you look at the thumb, and we'll talk, the conversation is Port Hope is in the thumb of Michigan. This is what it means. It's in that peninsula of the thumb. And Port Hope itself is roughly the hangnail of the thumb.
Okay.
So the town started, as many communities in Michigan did, around the Civil War, and it was a swamp and forest. And that was it. I mean, they came in Port Hope. William Stafford, a young man in his 20s, started buying up leases on property for lumbering. The community started out as a lumbering community. When the forests were gone, it became an agricultural community. And Huron County today is one of the most agriculturally productive counties certainly in the Midwest and probably the country.
Oh,
Now,
very
here's one
cool.
fact. One of the major crops up here is beans. Turtle beans, black beans, navy beans, soybeans. If you were the next time you're in Mexico City and you order dinner at the nice local restaurant, and beans are quite likely to be part of the menu, it's very likely that those beans in Mexico City were grown in Huron County.
Oh, really? Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it's an international export. I've been to Mexico. They have amazing fruit, but apparently they like to get their beans from elsewhere.
Very cool. Wow. Who knew, huh?
I didn't know that, but one of my classmates here years ago who's in the agricultural industry told me that, and I think my reaction was the same as yours, going, "Really?"
Can you share any interesting anecdotes or stories from the history of Port Hope that capture the essence of the community?
Well, obviously, there are a million individual stories. This is one my dad told me, and I don't know if it captures the essence of it, but there's kind of the laconic nature of folks that have lived in rural farming areas. There was a fellow, a farmer, back in the 30s, 40s. His name was Herman Fettig. And apparently Herman was quite the talker. People would kind of cross the street almost because they didn't want to say hello to Herman and not be able to break free of him for an hour or so. So Herman was just well known as this very ebullient person. Well, Herman, time goes on and Herman died. And he's buried in a cemetery that, maybe a mile from our farm outside of Port Hope, our family farm. And one day, my grandfather told his wife that he had to run to the cemetery for some reason. He'd be back in a few minutes. Well, an hour and a half later, he pulls in the driveway, and Hulda, his wife, goes, "Where have you been?" And he says, "I got caught up by Herman Fettig." And she looked at him. Well, turns out Herman has a flat granite stone in the cemetery, and it's very near the drive, the circle drive that circles the cemetery. And apparently, Grandpa was up there in the spring. He'd run off the driveway, buried his car in the soft soil, and got hung up on Herman Fettig's gravestone. And I went up there just a few years ago with some cousins, and we're looking around at the, family gravestones and whatnot. And I said, this Herman Fettig story came to mind. And we found his gravestone. And if you look kind of at an angle and the sun is just right, you can see a diagonal scratch across the face of that gravestone where Grandpa's car was tied up.
Oh, be darned.
But
Oh,
it's
Herman.
small town life. And this is about as small town rural as you get, except that we are on an amazing Lake Huron. And the people here have preserved a good chunk of the history of the community that dates back to, again, post-Civil War.
Right. Now, how do you guys engage younger generations in learning about and appreciating the history of Port Hope?
Well, we're not a mature organization, all right? So it's not like we're still in the process of turning what was a former lumber yard into a museum. And so we're doing a few things, but we do open up in the summer on a number of weekends, and we draw a good share of good crew of people of varying ages. And I guess the way I look at it is we're talking science fiction to these younger people. I have two sons who are 31, 27 and 31. Neither of them has ever used a phone book.
Mm.
My father would talk. He was a talker himself. He always had a quip and a comment. I asked him one day, what was it like? And this was in the 30s. He was a young boy. What was it like when electricity came to the farm? And Dad just fell silent for a second. And he looked up and said, "It changed everything."
I imagine
That's
so.
a different world than what we live in today and what people know today. Star Trek, where they go to strange new worlds and seek out different civilizations. This is as alien a civilization to young people today. What we're talking about post-Civil War and turn of the century and such, that's as alien a civilization as you'd find in a Star Trek show.
Yeah.
So we got to tell that. Those are the stories that you tell.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good analogy. Now, what are some of your favorite artifacts or pieces of memorabilia in the Historical Society's collection and why?
Well, we've got an 8-foot, it's under plexiglass. It's a diorama, historic diorama of downtown Port Hope. We've got Vic Ingram's homemade single seater airplane, one horse open sleigh, a dynamite screw, and we've got Doris the corpse.
Oh,
What are you interested in, Sean?
I don't know. What? Doris the corpse?
The Historical Society had acquired or collected what's called a transport basket. And it's a wicker basket, handles on each end. And if someone keeled over in the field or away from wherever and the body needed to be transported, they'd use this wicker basket primarily because it's a lot lighter than a wooden coffin.
Yeah.
And we had this basket, but it was just sitting there. So I was acquaintances with the director of a nearby historical society in the next county and said, "Don, you don't by any chance have any mannequins?" Well, as a matter of fact, she did. And Doris is kind of beat up, but she's now under a blanket. Well, the guy who picked her up, one of our members, picked her up and just arbitrarily called her Doris. So now she's Doris. And it was funny, we keep her in kind of like this alcove, a small alcove, and oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Well, this winter we were doing some obviously renovations, remodeling over the winter. And we moved Doris out into what's a kitchen area in the museum. And I'm sorry, but that creeped me out. Just come on, we got to move Doris over here because the setting was just a little too weird for me. The diorama, I got to talk about the diorama a little bit. A board member, Al Rutz, RUTZ, former engineer, worked with automobile industry and such in Detroit area for years, long retired now, built a scale model of the buildings downtown. But unlike most dioramas where it's a snapshot in time,
Yeah.
what Al did was, you mentioned the hotel. Well, that hotel has been around there forever. The hotel he pictures is how it looked in, say, the 30s. The building next to it is how it looked in the 50s. The store on the corner was how it looked in the 40s, and so on. So he's taken a snapshot of the downtown area, but it's from different times because buildings get remodeled and porches fall off or additions are added and so forth. So he looked at one building from the 30s and then the next building from the 50s and crafted little stories so that when you have the little people and the cars, in the diorama to flesh it out, well, those stories are real local people who were there at the time pictured.
Wow.
And he's done a paperback book about it. So he's got the actual history and then the little story, the couple walking into the diner are a long-time married couple, but this was their first date and they were going into the diner to have a meal and so on. And it's really a fascinating thing. You asked about how do you attract young people. My youngest son, who was in his mid-20s at the time, came up there and spent a half an hour talking to Al about the diorama and downtown and so forth. He was just fascinated by it. And it really is. It's an amazing thing to see.
Well, plus if you can walk in and Al could say, well, that's your great grandma right there, great grandma and grandpa that are walking into the diner.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yep.
Now,
yep.
You said
and the one-horse open sleigh, it was left there when a farmer bought a local farm. When he bought the farm in the 60s, that sleigh was in a shed. And over the years, he just hung on to it. He had it renovated and donated it to us. And kids today, everybody knows Jingle Bells, Jingle Bells.
Yeah.
But this is an actual one-horse open sleigh. And those are the connections you can make with people as you go along. This is not just a song. This is not just fantasy Santa Claus. This is a one-horse open sleigh, and here it is.
Is it in good shape?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, you could. I imagine you'd have to sharpen the cutters, but you could hitch up a horse, and if you had enough snow, off you go.
Wow, that is cool. Wow.
Yeah. And a dynamite screw. I got to tell you about this. And I'm not sure that's the exact term for it. Farmer brought in it's a rod, a heavy rod that's maybe 4 or 5 feet long.
Okay.
And at one end is a handle, and at the other end is a screw bit. It's all part of the rod. That's maybe an inch and a half in diameter. And I looked at that when he brought it in, and what the heck the lever, what, I just couldn't quite picture it.
Yeah.
Well, you put it in the ground under a stump, dig out a hole, drop in the stick of dynamite, and blow the stump out of the ground.
Oh, okay.
Now, he told me this in case, you're clearing stumps sometimes, Sean, and somebody hands you a stick of dynamite. Keep this in mind, all right? You always put the stick of dynamite on one side of the stump or the other. You never put it in the middle. If you put it on the side, when it blows, it basically tips the stump over.
Okay.
If you put it in the middle, it blows the stump sky high and there's debris everywhere. So don't put it in the middle, all right?
Yep. Okay. Well, that's very cool.
Yeah, well, it's useful information.
Yeah. A dynamite screw. Wow. Never heard of such a thing. That's very
well,
cool.
And again, I'm sure there are different names for it, but that's in fact what it is.
Think how many times they use that to clear fields.
This was, they say the forest primeval. There were, billions of board feet of lumber that were taken out of Michigan, and the thumb was a key part of that industry. When the forests were cleared, there were stumps everywhere. And a lot of times they were pulled out you dig them out. And I've pulled stumps. I've never used dynamite, but and I've never used a team of horses on them. We used a tractor, but you're out there with an axe and a shovel and a tractor and chain, and you're pulling stumps. And I just can't imagine clearing 40 acres or 100 acres of stumps.
Oh, no, that'd be crazy. That would be crazy. Especially
these
with
guys,
horses.
And they did it by hand. They did it by hand. They didn't have excavators or backhoes or, all the equipment we take for granted today.
Yeah, my goodness.
And the other thing about this is understand the topography here. The Great Lakes were carved out of the ground by mile-high glaciers 12,000 years ago.
Right.
Mile high. Where I'm sitting right now, there was a mile worth of ice on top of me at one point. And the ground, you'll find dinosaur fossils in Utah, but you don't find any to speak of in Michigan because everything was ground up, put under an intense grinder. Imagine a mile of ice.
Yeah.
It just turned everything into stone, and we have a lot of glacial. There's gravel, there's rocks, there's boulders. Up here, the farmers not only were clearing the stumps, but they were also picking stones. I remember even what they used to call a stone boat or a stone sleigh, and it was basically wooden runners on a low platform, and you drag it through the fields and throw stones on it. And every farm that I can think of had at least one stone pile in the corner of the field, because you'd keep, every time you plowed the field, you'd turn up something. And it just was a slow, methodical, time-consuming, back-breaking effort to turn this former swampy forest into productive farmland.
You had to do that every time you plowed for years and years, right?
Oh, pick up. I remember in the 60s and 70s and 80s picking stones.
Wow. Just amazing. Amazing.
But the soil is great. It's got, once you get the stumps clear and the stones out of there, it's a high quality, very productive soil. So it was worth the effort.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's mostly agriculture today.
Oh, overwhelmingly agricultural.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got Huron County, which is again the tip of the thumb, basically the thumbnail of on your looking at your palm. That's got over 2,000 square miles of property, and it's got 31,000 people. Now I looked it up. The war in Israel, in Gaza.
Yeah.
People, the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is 141 square miles, and it's got over 2 million people living in it.
Whoa.
We've got 2,000 square miles and 30,000 people. So yes, it's very much agriculture. You can drive anywhere in Huron County, and this occurred to me as a kid driving around, is that no matter where you look on the horizon, it's either trees or it's the lake.
That's got to be very beautiful. Yeah.
It's also very flat. But Yes, you're at most, anywhere in Huron County, you're at most a half an hour from Lake Huron.
Now, you're right on Lake Huron, and your town is called Port Hope. I'm assuming that means it was a port for ships. What is the history of the
Yes.
Port Hope area? Why is the village called Port Hope?
Well, as I said, William Stafford was the lumber baron, if you will. He bought some property, he bought leases in the 1850s as a young man. He had some financial backers. A couple of those backers were wanted to go visit the property. Well, back then, the lake was your expressway. The going overland was problematic to say the least.
Oh, yeah.
So they were sailing up here on a larger boat, and the captain of the boat said, "No, I'm not going to put you off here. There's a storm coming up, and I'm not sure. Whatever." So he put these two men in a skiff, and they were rowing to shore. Well, again, the wind picked up, the waves picked up, and these guys were getting a little nervous. And one of them, according to story, which apparently is pretty well documented, said, "When we hit land, that's going to be our port of hope." And that's where it came from.
Oh, B. Yeah, and of course, in those days when they were doing that, there was nothing there, right? Just trees.
It was Native Americans, Indians in not so much here, I mean, in terms of any kind of concentrations, more in the central part of the state. But though there was absolutely no development, it was woods and swamps.
Right. Okay.
And
Wow.
not woods, forests. I mean, these were white pine forests that were as tall as skyscrapers.
Right. Yeah. You're not getting your arms around those trees.
No, no, not at all. It's amazing to see the size of the trees, and you go to these old barns and such in the around the area here, and you'll see single beams, hand hewn, that stretch the length of the barn.
Wow. That is just amazing. And now they can what's it called? Dendo dating?
Oh, yeah. Well, you up here you don't really need that because we everything dates to, again, post Civil War. And there were two great fires that kind of crossed through the thumb. Wildfires. One was the fire of 1871, and then the Great Fire of 1881,
Okay.
which killed 200 people in a sparsely populated four county region up here. And that fire came through, and this is our family farm. If you go into the stables, the bottom portion of the barn, you can see singe marks on some of the beams.
Oh.
And those were likely trees that survived the fire of 1871. The pine trees, they have their needles and such don't go from top to bottom. Their needles are clustered at the top of the tree. So you'd have the fire kind of dancing along the treetops, but the tree itself was unhurt. So there were beams in our barn, and I'm sure others, that were singed from 1871. And I know this barn survived the fire of 1881.
Wow. Wow. What a history. What a history.
Well, one other thing that I find fascinating about the fire of 1881, and again, it burned thousands of acres. The stories of that, you had people on horseback or in a carriage, whatever, and the flames would outrace them. People taking their horse and buggy and driving full tilt into the lake to escape the fire.
Whoa.
That people standing in the lake they escaped the fire, but the ash was so intense that the ash landed in the water and basically created lye, LYE, which is kind of toxic. They'd come out of the water and they'd have reactions, burns to the lye, not from the flames.
Oh, man.
It was a tremendous tragedy. And again, in mostly inaccessible region. Clara Barton was in the state of New York and had just started the Danville, New York, I think it was, Red Cross. Well, she heard about the fire. She came to Michigan, and this fire was the first relief effort of what became the American Red Cross.
Oh, that's very cool. Wow. I just saw a picture of Clara Barton maybe 2 days ago. She was a great lady. Great lady.
Very compassionate. And to come across across the country, but New York was a lot farther away then than it is today.
Yeah.
And set up shop in the Thumb, her headquarters, and they dispensed aid and comfort and medical supplies and whatever else as they were able to the survivors of the fire. At one time after the fire, I'm told, again, the family farmhouse was housing 10 families that had been burned out.
Yeah.
It was, and picture it at the time. Okay, people think of, wildfires. What you had here were a lot of the trees were gone, but the slashings, the limbs, the branches were piled high here and there and everywhere, and they were all dry, and they were basically kindling. Then you get a spark starting in the southern part of the Thumb, gale force winds, literally moving up from west to east and pushing it across the Thumb. It was an inferno by any definition of it, and obviously it was a great tragedy. It's difficult for us to find artifacts because everything burned.
Right.
There are pieces that date from that time, but you can't really connect it to the fire per se. But the fire, the only benefit of the fire is it accelerated the process of clearing the land.
Right. Yeah, sure did.
For agriculture.
Very interesting.
And most of Port Hope survived the fire. The buildings, the Stafford sawmill down by the waterfront didn't survive the fire. And the only thing that remains from that is a chimney, an 80-foot standalone brick chimney that's a stone's throw literally from the shore of Lake Huron.
Yeah,
and as far as I know, that chimney is the only one of its kind still standing in Michigan, dating back to the lumbering days of the 1880s.
What did they use that chimney for? To burn sawdust or something?
Well, it could have been used. I would think it would be one of the engines that drove some of the, it created fire boilers and you had saws running on horribly dangerous belts and it was the lumbering was done in the winter because otherwise the forests were too hot and infested with bugs, infested certainly mosquitoes and biting flies. The malaria back in the 1860s and 70s and 80s, malaria up in Michigan was a major problem. And in the summertime is when they worked the sawmill. And so you had that kind of seasonal aspect to lumbering that I don't think many people
No, I didn't realize
think
that.
of. Wow. Oh, and the other thing with the ground, again, Michigan is quite swampy or had been, it was quite wet. In the winter, it allowed you to pull these wagons hauling these enormous logs. In summertime, those would have gotten bogged down in the mud.
Right. And who thinks of malaria these days?
Yeah, and luckily they've developed there are treatments and there are preventative methods, but those didn't exist again in the Civil War era. And malaria was a constant fear.
Yeah. Nobody thinks of malaria these days when you're walking outside, getting bit by a mosquito.
What I'm telling you, Sean, is we're talking science fiction. Who could believe that there are these Martians out there and these Klingons and Vulcans? And who believes that there's malaria in northern Michigan?
Yeah, exactly.
Or there was. It's a science fiction story that we're telling when we're talking history. But the difference is it's not science fiction, it's fact. But it's every bit, in its own way, every bit as fantastic as making up a story about a planet somewhere orbiting Jupiter or something.
Wow. I was talking to a historical society down in the deep south, Mobile, Alabama, and they had problems in the early days with malaria as well. And I said, do you still have, major problems with malaria? Oh, no, we have no problems with malaria now. And I was like, wow, it's all gone?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there are much better controls and that's a separate argument. Do you spray for mosquitoes, in
Right.
villages and communities, but the treatments and the preventative mechanisms are far different. Plus, people recognize what you have open, fetid, standing water is the breeding ground for mosquitoes. Well, you just don't leave old tires sitting around in rainstorms where the water can collect and create mosquito problems.
Right.
So a lot of it is environmental in the sense of attacking the source, the breeding grounds, if you will, of the mosquitoes. And another thing people don't, I grew up in Michigan. We have elections, every year, whatever it is, county elections, and you elect the sheriff and the clerk and the usual spots. In Michigan, every county has a drain commissioner.
Okay.
They're in charge of maintaining the drainage system, some natural, some ditches. Gotta keep the land. It's very fertile and it drains well, but you got to give it that water somewhere to go. And a lot of states, I mentioned this to somebody from elsewhere and they go, a drain commissioner? I've never heard of that. Well, if you grew up in what once was the swamp, I guess it's probably a good idea.
Right. Amazing. Garth, it's time for us to take a break for a few minutes.
All right. Good, Sean. Thank you.
All right, listeners, we'll be right back after these important messages.
Attention, residents and history enthusiasts of Port Hope, Michigan and beyond. Are you passionate about preserving heritage? Then listen up. The Port Hope, Michigan Area Historical Society needs your support to continue the restoration of the former Brinker Lumberyard into a history hub, containing a museum of regional historic artifacts, as well as the Gladys and R.B. Hunter Genealogical Center, meeting space and display space. Volunteers are hard at work restoring this historic lumberyard, located just a block east of the M25, right in the heart of Port Hope. But they need your help to keep the momentum going. Every donation, no matter how small, brings them one step closer to completing this remarkable project. The historic museum housed within the former lumberyard is already open to visitors on special occasions, offering a glimpse into the town's fascinating past. But the work doesn't stop there. The goal is to finish the renovations as soon as possible, and they need your generosity to make it happen. Join them in preserving Port Hope's history for generations to come. Visit the website at historicporthope.org or stop by the Port Hope, Michigan Area Historical Society today to make your donation and be a part of this incredible journey. Together, everyone can ensure that the legacy of Port Hope lives on. Port Hope, where the past meets the future. Let's make history together.
Brought to you by the Port Hope, Michigan Area Historical Society.
Here's a list of the essentials you'll need to renovate your bathroom whenever you get the time. Safety mask, gloves, goggles, caulking gun, propane torch, silicone sealant, tape measure, putty knives, stud finder, tiles, pry bar, power drill, bucket, chisel, adjustable wrench, screwdrivers, hacksaw, utility knife, several strong cups of coffee, chalk line, paint, brushes, flooring, tub enclosure, plumbing essentials, and an extension cord. And here's a list of the essentials you'll need to volunteer at your local genealogical or historical society instead. A smile, a handshake, an ability to meet and greet people and have fun, a knowledge of local history, research skills. Enjoy volunteering at your local genealogical or historical society today. That's very helpful of you and benefits your community.
When I was new, I was solid as a rock and ready for work. I could carry 1,700 pounds. My frame was made of hickory, poplar, and my tongue from an ash tree. I was sold to Bill and Mary. They loaded me up almost every week with all manner of things to haul. Spot and Brownie were hitched up to me and we all went along to town. I also hauled things the family needed from town back to the farm. When Mary died suddenly, they put her in me for the gentle final ride to the cemetery. Bill kept using me all the time, through all kinds of weather. I took a beating over those years. Then, for a long time, I stood behind the barn, alongside the thresher, unmoving and slowly rusting. I watched machines go by, hauling more than I can. Finally, I was loaded on the back of a flatbed truck, and they took me to a workshop. There, I was lovingly refurbished. They made sure all my parts were put back like new, and my wheels turned again. I was parked inside a museum. Electric lights show me off, and every day, people talk about how I'm made, how beautiful my wood is, and sometimes, occasionally, someone mentions Mary and Bill. I feel so proud that I can help others understand the past, which I guess I'm now a part of.
Rather than throwing it out, please donate historical records and objects to your local historical society today.
I am General Matto Vandu Maximanus, from the planet you refer to as BD 114672C. I am the legate of the 2nd AB Picturis B region, governor of the approaches to NU Octantis AB, interplanetary consul, commander of the legions of AB Picturis A, 91 Aquari B, Mu Leonis B, and Gamma Librae B, and I listen to Preservation Oaks on Microstream Radio.
9 out of 10 listeners agree. Preservation Oaks is the best podcast on the internet.
And now, back to Preservation Oaks.
Welcome back to Preservation Oaks. I'm your host, Sean Thomas Radcliff, and we're here today with our distinguished guest, Mr. Garth Kriewall, from the Port Hope, Michigan Area Historical Society. Let's pick up where we left off, and welcome back, Garth.
Thanks, Sean.
Garth, is there a specific reason why the Historical Society is named the Port Hope Area Historical Society?
Port Hope is the downtown is 3 blocks long. It has 250, 280 people. It's very small in and of itself. It's sparsely populated, but it covers a fair amount of territory. And we also have neighboring towns that they lived the same lives that people in Port Hope did. They faced the same obstacles. They overcame the same challenges. And in fact, they came from the same primarily European countries. This is a region of immigrants. And so I like to say it's Port Hope, but this is really a metaphor. This historical society, when we have a one horse open sleigh, when we have a horse-drawn plow, whatever it might be, yes, we can document the provenance to Port Hope, but people from around the state, around the region, around the country can relate to these, because it's not really the story of Port Hope people. It's really the story of people and how they dealt with the world as it was in this part of the country at that time. So it's really an area thing. And in my view, it's the thumb, and it's actually truly a Michigan museum. It just happens to be in Port Hope because Port Hope has a merry band of volunteers, and off we go.
Oh, fantastic. That was a great answer. Thank you.
Well, it's true. It's people get caught up in when you're doing history about, oh, this history of my town, my community, my whatever, and it's full of pictures of, I don't know, teacups from the high society or pictures on the wall of people that no one can connect with. These are real stories about real people, and they're relatable to people from that have no connection to Port Hope or even to the Thumb or even Michigan, perhaps.
Right.
But they're relatable stories. When you show them an ironing board with an iron that's got a little bell at the top of it, a canister where you put white gas in it, and you had your own gas-powered iron to iron your shirts or your pants. Well, okay, that came from Port Hope, or it was owned by Port Hope people, but anybody anywhere can relate to that.
Yep. Now, what unique challenges or opportunities do you face in safeguarding Port Hope's heritage?
I don't know that they're unique. I think it's everything. I think our primary challenge is kind of staying alive. Our demographics, as again, I'm fairly confident is true of most every historical society, museum, et cetera, is that their core demographic is retired folks or people that are getting close to that. And so we've got to constantly try and present ourselves to people, not necessarily getting 20 and 30-year-olds to participate, but to get them aware of us, and then to bring in people that, oh, I don't want to get involved. I can't commit to some big project. Well, no, okay, but a couple of times a summer, can you give us 3 hours? Oh, well, yeah, I might be able to do that. That's our challenge. And again, it's the same challenge that I bet I can't imagine any of your listeners not nodding their heads saying, boy, isn't that the truth? Because it's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Volunteering, especially when people have families and young children and so on, is difficult.
Well, I grew up in Port Hope, and then I moved away, not too far, about an hour and a half away to a larger community, and that's where I spent my adult life and raised my boys. But my parents were always here, but it wasn't until I retired that I'm back here, and it's an entirely different experience of someone dropping in once a month for a weekend and living in a community.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got. I'd like to talk about our volunteers though a little bit, Sean, if I can.
Absolutely.
We've got. Someone asked me, how many volunteers do you have? And I started thinking about it, and I go, well, overall, people contributing this and that on special projects and and such and so, we've got 75, 100 people, and that doesn't even include those that maybe drop off an artifact or contribute and send us a check. These are people who physically actually do something. Maybe once a year, maybe they bring food. Maybe it can be all sorts of things. But of that group, there's maybe 6, 7 hardcore people that show up a few hours every week, as we did this morning, and they were seating rafters, putting up interior walls at the lumber yard, moving raw cut lumber from one place to another because we needed it somewhere else. So, sawing the boards, pounding the nails, doing the heavy lifting. You've got a bunch of 70-year-old men up on a roof. It's just that group is very small, but they're very dedicated, and they have the support of the greater community. People see something going on here, and they want to. They're certainly, whether they're deeply involved or not, but they're certainly, by and large, very supportive of what we're doing.
That's what I was so excited about this interview with you and your society, because there is something going on in Port Hope. Your society was just formed in 2020, and there's a lot going on in Port Hope. Can you talk about the roots of your society story and what's going on there?
Well, the society, the group, these merry band of volunteers, well, over a decade ago, rescued and restored the Pere Marquette Railroad Depot. It's a 1904 depot, one of the few such depots that was never repurposed. So it's not, there's no modern kitchen, or it was never turned into a house or a restaurant or a diner or something. So anyway, these guys did this, and it was really, I wasn't involved with it, but I certainly know some of these folks and hear the stories. It was an amazing effort. Well, people started, oh, they're saving history. Well, I've got some old stuff. Would you guys like this? And all of a sudden, the community, in the greatest sense and the largest sense, started thinking about history. And at somewhere at that point, one of our society president is Jim Hunter. The Hunter family owned the Brinker Hunter lumber yard in Port Hope for many, many years. And it's just a big old barn, traditional wooden lumber yard. That closed after the turn of the century, 2002 or 4, and it sat empty for 20 years. Well, all of a sudden, there was collections of old stuff, artifacts. What do we do with it? Could we do something? And there was a guy, his name was Sid Holodnik, and Sid was a classic polymath, but unlike most very, very smart people, he didn't make sure you knew that he was the smartest guy in the room. He was very self-effacing, very, very matter of fact, and Sid was a leader with the depot, and they took this building that was the lumberyard that was only a few years from and a stray match away from nothing, and said, boys, we can do this. And oh my God, the work that was involved, and it's still ongoing, but the progress that's been made is really astounding. And Sid sadly died last year of cancer, and the members, what Sid would like to do behind the lumberyard is a stream, a creek. And Sid would like to take a break once in a while and set up a chair and just kind of listen to the water burbling past. Well, that's on the lumberyard property, and the members, particularly some of the women, said, we're going to put in a memorial garden. And so it's small, but it's right along the water, a little walkway, a few benches, plantings, and just it's the way for the community to remember and honor Sid, who would never take credit for this, but he was the one. And I think this is true for most organizations, particularly as they're starting up, as they're kind of taking shape. You need somebody somehow or other to say, we can do this. Yeah. We can make this happen, and have other people believe him or her. And once they have that belief, well, maybe we can. And hey, I know a guy, or maybe I can loan you my truck, or I've got some lumber you can use, and it kind of snowballs. I was talking to one of the key volunteers, the guy who's there on a Saturday by himself, 15 feet in the air, pounding rafter beams in place. And I asked Darwin once about that, and he said, Sid had a vision, and we're going to carry it out. And that just, I still get choked up thinking about that. He was an amazing guy, but you got to believe you can do it. And he helped everybody believe they could do it. And that was the kind of the dynamo behind, the spark behind what's happening here.
You guys are making it happen. There's no doubt about it. And I'm excited for you guys because, and all I've seen is the pictures, and I've read some of the articles, and you guys are laying concrete and building rafters and doing things with you're talking 150 foot by 30 building, and it's a
Yes.
lumberyard building. Now, lumberyard buildings weren't built to be a museum. They were built to hold lumber. And
Yes.
so they didn't have insulation. They didn't have concrete floors. They didn't have, anything to do with a regular building. But you guys are transitioning and transforming this thing into a wonderful space for the community.
It's crazy.
Yes.
No,
Yeah, it's just something else.
It's just crazy. I don't know if people can envision a lumberyard, the traditional lumberyard. But this one, you'd pull in the north door, you'd stop at the office, and you'd say, I need shingles and 2x4s and nails and whatever you're picking up. And you'd drive the length of the lumberyard, and you'd stop at this bay, and they'd load on your plywood. And you'd pull up another 10 feet, and they'd throw on your roofing shingles and so forth. And you'd drive out the south door, and off you go.
Amazing.
And those storage units, there were low headers. They were basically bins that went up, story and a half. And you'd have different supplies in each of those bins. Well, the headers for those bins, the support mechanism were such that you'd have to tend to crouch down. It certainly isn't like walking into somebody's living room.
Right.
And so what these guys are doing is they're cleaning out those bays. They poured concrete in what were voids underneath plank floors. So now there's a solid concrete floor throughout most of it. And we're doing it bits and pieces at a time. And then raising the headers so that we are basically taking small bays or bins and turning them into rooms. And in the process, they raised the catwalk around the perimeter, inside the perimeter of the building, raised that catwalk up by 3 or 4 feet, and are putting in new supports and tearing out old supports that obstructed people's access to these spaces. And we're using lumber. Most of the lumber we have, though, has been salvaged or donated. We use a lot of rough cut lumber. We have people that, I've got some trees here. And then another guy who's got a small sawmill, a personal sawmill, will cut it up for us. And in fact, those rafters that I'm talking about, they're real 2x4s. You go to Home Depot and buy a 2x4, and it's less than 2 inches deep, and it's less than 4 inches wide. These are real rough cut, full-size 2x4s. And so we're transforming slowly, transforming the interior. So it's like a pedestrian mall, kind of an enclosed pedestrian mall. You can walk, you'll end up, it's a work in progress, certainly. But you end up walking in and you can look at the bays and the display areas on one side and turn around, and there's bays and display areas on the other, and it's all under a roof.
How exciting.
And it's a big enough space that we can hang Vic Ingram's airplane in there.
Wow. That is so exciting. So exciting for the community. I mean, you'll be able to do so much with that and tell such a story. Oh my God.
Well, the different bays are going to be in different, there's different themes, if you will. And it's, as is the case with an all volunteer organization, someone has an idea and someone else is sure. And if you want to do it, well, we've got an area that is a dairy, focusing on dairy, and it's got old milk cans, and it's got old dairy supplies and materials and from milking cows. It's got a stanchion in there, and a stanchion it's something that holds the cow in place while it's being milked.
Yeah.
There are little wooden stanchions that basically clamp around a cow's neck and hold it in place, and the rest of the cow is freestanding. This particular stanchion that I'm talking about is a metal structure, and it's kind of like a cage. You open one end, the cow comes in, and then you close that gate, so the cow is kind of enclosed in a cage. You milk it, then you open the other end, and he walks out, and you bring a new cow in. And this stanchion, one of the guys was determined to get a stanchion like this. And there was a barn, And he asked the folks, and it was an abandoned barn. The farm hasn't been used as a dairy barn in a long time. And the barn literally is collapsing. I mean, you're going in and the roof line is collapsing. And we're down in the basement. There's concrete blocks that have fallen down because walls are falling down.
Yeah.
There's the ceiling. It's not it's not drywall ceiling, but it's some kind of mechanism. It's covering, but that's coming loose, and there's straw and hay falling down on your head. And we're in there, and I'm thinking, there are a lot of stupid ways to die, but to have a barn collapse on you when you're trying to rescue a cattle stanchion, a rusty old cow stanchion, I says, that's got to be on the list somewhere. But these guys are amazing. I'm there as unskilled labor. I can help and help out. But these guys, they're just relentless. It wasn't I'd have walked away from it. Oh my God, let me call Sears up and I'll order a stanchion. I'll pay for it. No, they were going to determine to get it out of there. They're cutting and lifting and toting, and we loaded it on the back of a pickup truck with 3 people. It took 5 to unload it. So we must have been kind of channeling that energy, I guess.
Yeah.
But it tells a story.
Amazing.
Cattle today are milked. There's a farm, I don't know, 5 miles away from where I'm sitting right now. They milk on a turntable. There are 100 cows at a time being milked. And it's like a clock dial, only the whole thing moves. It's a merry-go-round. It takes 7 or 8 minutes. The cow gets on one end. In the 7 or 8 minutes that it takes for it to go from 12 o'clock to 12 o'clock again, the cow is milked. It steps off. Another one comes on. That's different. This little stanchion that I'm talking about held 1 cow, and this barn had 4 stanchions. So they milked 4 cattle at a time.
Jeez.
Today they're milking 100 cattle simultaneously. It's just a different world. But what's fascinating about so much of history, if you think about it, is what you're talking about are simple things: growing, milking, building. But the tools that people had, the ingenuity they used, the determination they had. I mean, milk today is milk that was done 100 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cattle, it's milk. And the process of extracting the milk from a cow's udder, there's no mystery to that.
Yeah.
But it's become more sophisticated, larger. And in fact, and I have to say this 100 cattle at a time, a very mechanized, industrialized kind of process, it's far more sanitary and safer, the end product, and better for the cattle than these small operations where you're throwing milk into a milk can and you're kind of sort of cooling it. Well, on these industrial things, in a matter of seconds, they've taken the milk from the 101 degree body temperature of the cow down to 36 degrees. Boom. Just, it's got to be safer. It's got to be better. It's got to be higher quality.
Yeah.
But the process is simple. The end result is the same, but how you get there is what changes over history.
Much safer. Yeah. Amazing.
And it's better for the cattle. It sounds, people have this picture of farms and they have some guy in a straw hat and a piece of grass in between his teeth and overalls.
Well, the thing is, you got to feed 350 million people. The population isn't decreasing. You've got to be more effective and efficient.
Well, and people don't want to spend $8 for a gallon of milk.
Right. That's right.
And and that's another thing, and it's just kind of off to the side. But these farms up here were developed primarily here. Were like my great grandparents were German immigrants. There are a lot of Polish immigrants.
Right.
People milking the cows today, a lot of them are Mexican immigrants.
Yeah. Right.
It's just they came from maybe a different country, but they all came here for a reason, and it was to make a better life.
Yeah.
And this whole area is absolutely built by immigrants. No question about it.
God
I mean,
bless 'em.
Garth Kriewall. Kriewall isn't exactly, Smith or Jones. That's a German name.
Yeah, everybody in this country pretty much is an immigrant.
Well, of course, it's just, oh, well, different time, different world. Well, yeah, it was a different time and a different world, but there are some similarities. And we're telling, again, any history group, us included, but any historical society or museum or what have you, is looking to tell those stories about, and as you say, everybody at one point came here from somewhere else outside of the indigenous population.
Yeah.
And how did they survive in a different world? You get me thinking about this. Let me tell you again another personal story.
Okay.
We had the family farm. When the folks died, we sold the farm to a local farmer, and the homestead, he was renting it out. I wanted to go back and take some pictures, just some walk around the grounds a little bit, take a few pictures. So, okay, the renter said, "Fine, come on out." And as I'm doing this, he says, "By the way, are there any bodies buried here?" And I says, "Bodies? No, no." He goes, "Well," and there's a headstone, one of these kind of flat, square headstones from 1920,
Yeah.
and it gave the name William, and it was 1843 to 1927 or something, and it was broken off at an angle, clearly vandalized. It had no surname, no last name on it. I said, "Yeah, do you want me to take it? I don't know where Dad picked this up." And he goes, "Yeah, it's creeping me out. Go take it." So I go do some investigating, and it turns out it's from my great grandfather's gravesite at this local cemetery I talked about. And it had been vandalized, and people knew that it was part of our family. And my dad lived in the neighbor. I'm sure he just picked it up and took it home. Well, then I'd heard some family stories, and what was this Wilhelm was his given name, but it became modified to William.
Yeah.
He came over here as a young man in the 1860s. He enlisted in the Army, fought 3 or 4 years in the Civil War. I don't know, exactly what battles he was involved in or anything. But after the war, he was honorably discharged. He went back to the family farm, raised family, et cetera, et cetera. The anecdote about that is that when family anecdote is that when great grandpa's sons were of age, he sent them off to the Pacific Northwest, which at that time and place, that was like, I'm never going to see you again.
Yeah.
And the reason was he wanted to get them as far away from here as possible because he did not want them to ever go through what he did during the war.
Okay.
And there were no war stories. There are no hand down of any kind of stories about that. But I think that anecdote tells me all I want to know about what he did and saw and experienced during the Civil War. And here was a guy who probably, at the very best, spoke broken English. He was a new immigrant.
Yeah, it had to be
Great
pretty
stories.
terrible in the Civil War.
Great stories. These are the people that built our country.
Yep.
And if we can remember not so much them as individuals, because we tend to remember the rich and famous, but it's the kind of the in many ways nameless, faceless folks who just wouldn't quit, who just were smart enough to come up with a new way to milk a cow, who were determined enough to clear property of stones and stumps, and who were committed to making a better life for their family and their children. It's just, I'm constantly impressed by those people at that time. And here I'm the kind of guy who gets all upset when my Wi-Fi goes, wonky.
Well, just like your
These guys
volunteers are doing, you're just, it's the American spirit. You just roll up your sleeves and get it done.
And it's really rewarding. And as I say, I'm unskilled labor. I'm over there to help hand somebody a hammer. I can saw a board and pound a nail, but don't ask me to design how to put in a frame a window or something.
Right.
And these guys are just doing it because, well, Sid said we could do it, and it's kind of a cool thing. And the train just left the station.
Now, Garth, I'd like to provide listeners with the contact information for the Port Hope Area Historical Society.
Yes.
Your website is historicporthope.org. Your
Yes.
Facebook page is Port Hope Area History, and from there you can use Facebook Messenger to connect with the society. There's also a subnode of the Historic Port Hope website, which is the Gladys and R.B. Hunter Genealogical Center, or Genealogy Center, and you can get to them on the Port Hope Genealogy Society on historicporthope.org. So just go historicporthope.org/genealogy. And the address of the Port Hope Area Historical Society is 8016 Portland Avenue, Port Hope, Michigan, 48468. And I also want to mention the contact information for the Pierre Marquette Railroad Museum Depot, and their website is porthopedepot.org. And I mentioned that last contact because there are links to the depot on the Port Hope Area Historical Society website and vice versa. However, it's worth noting that the Port Hope Area Historical Society works cooperatively with the Friends of the Port Hope Depot, and that they are separate organizations. The historic chimney in Port Hope is owned by the county park system. Again, they're all separate, but everybody works cooperatively, thank goodness.
That is, in fact, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of cross-pollination in membership, obviously, with these two, with the depot and the lumberyard. In fact, today I helped load up some folding chairs from the lumberyard to take back to the depot because they have a meeting tonight. So and they're only, those two buildings are half a block apart. And then a block farther east is the chimney, and a stone's throw from the chimney is Lake Huron. So it's like this little historic district that would take you, if you're walking past it, would take you 5 minutes to walk from the downtown down to the lake.
Yeah, it's amazing. Really amazing. You're building something fantastic.
When I was kind of preparing for this, I'm trying to do some homework and whatnot, but what kept coming back to me, and I had to look it up so I got the phrasing right. But Margaret Mead was a famous cultural anthropologist. She studied cultures and societies and how they worked and why they succeeded and why they failed and so forth. One of her quotes, and it really resounds with me in terms of Port Hope, is she said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has."
That is true. Yep, I'm totally.
And that's what we're talking about here. It's a small group of people who say, "We can do this, boys." They're channeling Sid Hladnik, and it's, we can do this.
Now, the Port Hope Area Historical Society, if somebody wants to join as a member, and I hope they do, what kind of memberships do they have?
Well, you can get a personal membership, a yearly membership for $25. You can get a family membership for $40, and you don't get a lot for that. I mean, you're part of the message chain. There's a periodic newsletter a few times a year, and you get a lot of warm fuzzies and well wishes from the folks here working on it. Then we have a number of longer term permanent members. A life member, you can become that for $500. And then a founding member for $1,000. But if any of your listeners have good thoughts about rural Michigan and have $10,000 in disposable income, we'll take that too. We might even start our own category for someone like that.
Yeah, that's great. And how do they join? Do they go on the website, or what's the best way to do that?
We're working now with the Community Foundation of Huron County. And again, we're a relatively immature organization. We certainly have no paid staff. We don't have a huge financial base. What the Community Foundation, we hope to have in a month or two, somewhere short term, a link to the Community Foundation, and they would be our fiduciary. So people could go and make online donations and memberships and such through their infrastructure. But that's not in place now. But I have to shout out to the Community Foundation, the Huron County Community Foundation. They recently gave us a grant for a special project we're doing at the lumberyard, and they're working with us to talk about how they can provide a vehicle for online donations. And in fact, they're having their annual meeting on the floor of the lumberyard this fall. So,
all right.
But right now, the best way is basically snail mail. And you could write a check and put it in the envelope. And the abbreviated one is the envelope, PHAHS, Post Office Box 133, Port Hope, Michigan, 48468. Simple, clean, it's a small town. It'll get there.
Yep. Just send them a letter and say, I want to be a member, and choose your membership category, and you'll be a member.
We're like Scarlett O'Hara. We depend upon the kindness of strangers, and friends. There are people that just have embraced what's going on here and really want to be a part of it. I'm constantly pleasantly reminded of that sense of place and sense of history, that people with a connection, and in some cases not a particularly strong connection or any connection at all, think about what we're doing here.
Garth, it's time to take a break for a few minutes.
Very good, Sean.
All right, listeners, we'll be right back after these important messages.
Attention, history buffs and community enthusiasts in Port Hope, Michigan. Are you ready to roll up your sleeves and make a difference in preserving the village's heritage? The Port Hope, Michigan Area Historical Society needs you. They're on a mission to transform the former Brinker Lumberyard into a vibrant history hub, complete with a museum showcasing regional artifacts, the Gladys and R.B. Hunter Genealogical Center, meeting space, and display areas. But they can't do it alone. As an all-volunteer organization, they rely on the passion and dedication of individuals like you to bring this vision to life. Whether you're a history enthusiast, a skilled craftsman, or just eager to lend a helping hand, they have a place for you. Volunteering with the Port Hope, Michigan Area Historical Society is a chance to be part of something truly special, to preserve the area's legacy for generations to come. Ready to get involved? Simply stop by the lumberyard when you see vehicles parked out front, or visit the website at historicporthope.org for more information. They can't wait to welcome you to the team. Port Hope, where history comes alive through the power of community. Join today and make a difference.
Brought to you by the Port Hope, Michigan Area Historical Society.
I'd like to talk about volunteering, especially as a way to help your growing family. As we all know, there are a million things to accomplish and only 24 hours a day to do so. Many people have no idea how to find time to commit to their local museum, cultural, historical, or genealogical society. But it's a valuable investment in the community and your family on many levels, and something that you'll need to make work to realize the benefits. Why does it matter to you personally to get involved in your community? Well, if you're a business leader, it's important to keep your finger on the pulse of the local business community. By doing so, you not only do your part to support local causes, but also stay aware of opportunities to grow your company. While there are a variety of ways to accomplish this, including social media, newspapers, television, social circles, and networking, there is no better way than to build relationships by engaging yourself in these valuable organizations within the community. However, if you're raising a family and seeking to train your kids in the life lesson, quote, to do well for your community by doing good, unquote, then it's imperative to immerse yourself and your family in helping the community and having fun while doing so. Maybe you've wondered, how can I volunteer in my community, but still have a lot of fun? If so, being a volunteer at a museum, cultural, historical, or genealogical society could be for you. You'll find great opportunities to work with children in order to pass on knowledge and history. Not only do you get to teach the next generation of kids some valuable life skills and information, but you also get to enjoy the activities while teaching them. Volunteers typically help guide visitors, answer questions, answer phones, perform research, help file, work with children, and a huge number of other things that keep the society running smoothly. You also get to attend the events and learn more about your community so that you can pass this on to your family and friends. Your family will get a sense of belonging, a sense of place. For those who say they don't have time to volunteer, time is secondary. People with a family and other obligations can generally give just a few hours a week. You don't have to volunteer for hours and hours of time. You can start by micro-volunteering, with a shift between 1 to 2 hours. These societies host a variety of fun activities to bring members and non-members together. These organizations are non-profit organizations, meaning that they have very few staff members on the payroll and rely on volunteers to assist with the rest of their activities. There are always things to do, and if you strike up a conversation with any of them, they'll be happy to help you find something that you will love doing and that helps your family and community. It's an exalted feeling to volunteer your talent, plus the people you spend your time with and the experiences you gain are invaluable. There are literally thousands of people from all walks of life who volunteer their time, energy, and resources to museums, cultural, historical, and genealogical societies all across the country. If you enjoy books and quiet, the research library is the perfect place for you to volunteer. You will get to organize books and perform research tasks to help others document their lineage. You can be involved in digitizing records and photographs. You can enter records into a database or help the curator. These societies can offer many different activities for you to engage and help by doing something you love. Museums, cultural, historical, and genealogical societies generally work closely with community members, schools, and businesses. They often host events and fundraisers to bring information to the public and improve the success of the area. You can help improve your community by giving back to these organizations that make your community a better place to live. One of the most beneficial and perhaps underrated perks of starting your volunteer journey is the example it sets for those around you. Within your circle, volunteering is phenomenal for the wellness of your community, as you're demonstrating that helping is a core value. From your family members and friends to anyone else in your circle, your efforts to make the time and commit to your community won't go unnoticed. They will set a positive tone in your circle and instill a sense of direction throughout their lives because they will be at the heart of the community. Please consider volunteering with your family today. You'll be glad you did.
And now, back to preservation of.
Welcome back to Preservation Oaks. I'm your host, Sean Thomas Radcliff, and we're here today with our distinguished guest, Mr. Garth Kriewall, from the Port Hope, Michigan Area Historical Society. Garth, let's pick up where we left off, and welcome back.
Thanks, Sean.
You are most welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
What else am I going to be doing? Hey, it's always fun to talk to. I know very few people in Utah, so this is great.
Can you tell the audience about any current initiatives or needs of the society that you want the people of your area to know about and support?
The ongoing construction work is, if someone knocked on our door. Just this is how it works. And again, Sid Hladnik kind of helped establish this protocol is Tuesday mornings. Show up Tuesday mornings. Give a few hours of your time, and a volunteer is going to provide lunch. So, it became a social thing as well as a volunteer opportunity. So anybody shows up on a Tuesday morning, wear work clothes, and we'll find something to keep you occupied. But our initiatives are more in the planning stages. We'd like to open this up to work out arrangements with school groups and such, which we haven't done. Again, we have no paid staff. It's all volunteers. What we do is, again, volunteers have some periodic lectures and history programs. One of our members organizes a bus trip a few times a year to go out to the local farm and see a modern farm and recognize how that operates as opposed to the storybook pictures that people have in their minds. We're putting up, with the help of a grant from the Huron County Community Foundation, we're putting up, it's an overhang on the one side of the lumberyard, one area of the lumberyard. That'll be a sheltered space for, people can be out of the sun, out of the rain as they, sit at a picnic table. Or there's also an area within the lumberyard, you slide the door open, and that can be a small stage, a room for a musician or a speaker or a small band or whatever, but then can use that as a venue for people sitting out under the overhang in the shade. We're also kind of encouraging, now that we're getting structurally in terms of the building structure more secure, or that's more under control, I should say. We're now looking more at the individual displays and looking for local donations we're going to have, for example, an area that is for the military with old military uniforms, pennants, medals, what have you. There's one that's one-room schoolhouse, evokes a one-room schoolhouse, which is also a little tidbit people might not, they certainly wouldn't know, is there are some, 20 one-room schoolhouses, rural schools still in the state of Michigan. 6 of those are in Huron County.
Cool.
Yeah, it's just a part of life. It's I don't know if you call it tradition or just we've always done it that way or what it is, but we'll go back to the little desks and the chairs and give people a little sense of what it was like to be in a classroom where an 8th grader and a kindergartner and a 1st grader are all sitting next to each other.
Now those are exhibits you have planned, but you have exhibits now, even though you're doing renovations and you're totally focused on renovating the building, you still have some exhibits set up now, right?
Oh, yes. We're expanding it, but one is kind of a household area, if you will. There's a kitchen area that's got an old coal-fired kitchen stove, and a wood-burning kitchen stove. It's got a couple of Hoosier cabinets, the wooden furniture. They're not, today modern kitchens have kind of built-in cabinets. These were pieces of furniture that held drawers and cupboards and such. And we've got a few of those. We've got a pie safe. Do you know what a pie safe is?
Yeah.
We've got one, the nice screening and the narrow shelves and for the ventilation, and people just haven't seen that. That's a different world that you'd want the pies to cool or whatever the pastries are, your baking goods.
Yeah.
You want them to cool, but you want to keep the flies off them because it was a different world back then. So we've got this kitchen area that's got a number of things in it that are of different eras, where we've collected in the process of organizing more of a front room or a family room with some chairs and lamps and china cabinet and things like that. And we're in the process of building or drywalling and securing an adjacent bay that will be bedroom, that will have an old bedroom set, a couple of old cribs that we have, baby cribs, and a baby buggy, the stuff that you have. We've got a kind of a tool room that has historic wrenches and saws and miter boxes and you name it in there that people can look at. Again, I said the dairy area with the stanchion and the milk cans, and it's kind of the story of that aspect of agriculture. And then we've got some things in addition to the one horse open sleigh and the diorama. We've got a restored buggy that was locally owned and restored.
Nice.
A horse buggy, and then a one horse mail buggy that, I mean, and this is a guy that I knew as a kid, but he would, when he was younger, he would hitch the horse up and deliver mail to the rural routes. And the story I understand from my grandmother is there would be times, and we lived that farm was about 3 miles out of town. There'd be times when, in addition to whatever mail, she'd put in the mailbox $1 or whatever, and ask that they bring out some milk, or some bread or salt or sugar or whatever they might get in town. And the next day, the mailman would drop off that pound of sugar in the mailbox.
Oh,
again, a different world. This is if it weren't true, it'd be hard to believe.
Now, is there an admission to see the exhibits?
Everything is free.
Okay.
The 4th of July is the big village event. On our on the lumberyard property is an open area that we turn over to a flea market, craft show flea market. And that has an admission fee to get into that. And then you have access to the lumberyard. But the other days that we're open, there's walk in. If the door is open, come on in.
And when are you open?
Well, we're expanding our hours. We've only been open a few days a summer as work is going on. We're planning to expand that this year and be open at least, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, and then there are a couple of special holidays in there. There's a one-day Port Hope little hometown kind of festival, ABC Day. And then there's the Huron County Museum Weekend in September. So we're trying to be open at least one weekend a month through the season. Okay. And ideally, the depot is open through the season. Memorial Day to roughly Labor Day is open from 10 till 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturdays and 1 to 4 on Sundays, every weekend through the season. And we'd like to eventually get on that schedule. But that's still a ways away.
Okay. Yeah, because you're focused on renovations right now.
Yeah, it's a daunting process when you have, and basically, 70-year-old men.
Yeah.
Who are donating their time and donating their tools. They're, the tools people use. It's, I have that saw, I'll bring it in. I have a chop saw. I have a portable scaffolding. I have this, that, the other thing. And they're donating the use of their equipment, certainly their time. And they're doing it, again, because we can do this. Yeah. It's a good thing to do.
Absolutely. So what's the best way for people to connect with someone in the society if they have questions or if they want to make a donation or something like that? Is it the messenger on Facebook?
Yeah, that would be the best. We don't really have an email account that is monitored. And again, I don't want to give out personal phone numbers because, that just gets complicated.
Yeah.
The best would be to go on Facebook or go to somebody who has Facebook and connect with the Port Hope Area Historical Society on Facebook. And those messages do get monitored because, quite frankly, we use Facebook as our primary means of letting the world know what progress we're making. As you mentioned it, that you've seen our posts that we keeping people excited about us moving ahead.
Yeah, they're great posts, and they show a lot of progress and a lot of dedication.
Well, like I say, I'm the one walking around taking pictures and writing something up because you don't want me framing in a drywall room or doing working up on the roof putting sheet metal down. That's not my skill set.
Right. Now, Garth, I have a kind of a crazy question. I've been asking my guests this question, and I think it's a great question, and you have a lot of love for history, and so I'm going to ask you this question, and we'll see how it goes. What do you think the world will look like in 100 years?
You ever see those newspaper articles where I saw one just recently published in 1923 and the world in 2023, and it's all flying cars and spacemen and whatnot, although every once in a while something comes up like you will have a telephone that you can carry around with you in your pocket. Sometimes they're correct. I think myself personally, I think the greatest wild card is artificial intelligence. It's already transforming a lot of what we do. I mean, people, if you were a hotshot computer programmer, even 5 years ago, you could go anywhere, do anything. Today, a lot of that work has been farmed out to artificial intelligence. So where that goes, I'm not quite the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator Skynet pessimist, but I think the nature of the world is going to change. That's going to change so many things that it's very difficult for me to envision what direction and how that's going to manifest itself. But that would be the one wild card that I would say right now. Mechanical things, we'll just keep making progress on, building electric cars or electric vehicles, alternatives to coal and oil for energy sources. We'll just kind of make incremental changes and incremental progress in those areas over time. But breakthrough type stuff is to me, it's artificial intelligence.
Okay. Thank you for that very much. Appreciate your comments. Is there any other information or message you'd like the community or members to know about?
We're here. We're doing some good things. We're trying to tell individual stories, but also stories of a people and a place and a time that is difficult to imagine today. One of my favorite stories, here's one that goes along with this. And again, I'm telling a lot of personal stories, but this is one. My dad, who worked for a time for the Port Hope phone company as a young man out of high school, related to me. A local family after the war got a letter, and it said their son was writing this letter saying, on a certain date and time, I will call home from Australia. Well, oh my God, that might as well have been Mars, right? The family went to the phone company, talked to the owner, and related this information that on a certain date and time that we're going to be getting this important phone call. The owner nodded his head. And on the day before that phone call was to come in, he sent one of his employees out to personally check every connection on every telephone pole between the home office and this home in the community. Now, we're only talking a few blocks, but literally taking a ladder, going out and checking each connection because, of course, this was a phone call from Australia.
Yeah. Oh.
It's just a different world. Today, I mean, I can butt dial Australia on my cell phone. Back then, oh my God, that kind of communication, almost miraculous that it was even possible.
That's an amazing story. Thank you for that.
Thanks,
Garth, I just want to thank you for spending time with us today.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've said, I've really been looking forward to talking with you about the village and the society because what you all are working to accomplish there in Port Hope is just so exciting and inspiring. And I hope everybody in the area and in Michigan and beyond sends in their donations and their well wishes and offers to help and contacts you. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate that. We couldn't do it, yes, without this little merry band of volunteers, but also the support expressed in many different ways by folks local and far afield.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll end our time with our guest, Mr. Garth Kriewall. Listeners, please stay tuned for my comments and wrap-up, which is coming up next. Ladies and gentlemen, as we draw the curtains on another episode, I'm honored to extend my deepest gratitude to Mr. Garth Kriewall, the communications volunteer for the Port Hope Area Historical Society. Garth's exceptional expertise and dedication to communication have undoubtedly enriched our understanding of the area, its past, and the Society's invaluable contributions to preserving Port Hope's rich history. It's truly a privilege to have someone of Garth's caliber join us today. His intelligence, knowledge, and unwavering commitment are commendable, and the Port Hope Area Historical Society is fortunate to have him as a vital member of their team. The genesis of Port Hope is steeped in a remarkable tale of faith and resilience. From its humble beginnings with William Stafford's prayer to the Almighty, promising to name the town Port Hope, to present-day endeavors of the Port Hope Area Historical Society, hope has remained an enduring beacon guiding their noble efforts to safeguard the area's heritage. At the heart of this noble cause was the indomitable spirit of Mr. Sid Hladnik, whose visionary leadership propelled the society forward. As the community fondly remembers Sid and honors his legacy through the Memorial Garden, Sid's spirit lives on, inspiring them to continue preserving Port Hope's history and fostering community solidarity. For those inspired to contribute to the Port Hope Area Historical Society's noble mission, please consider sending your generous donations to the address provided. Your support is invaluable in ensuring their success in the preservation of the area's unique heritage. A special word of appreciation to Garth for his invaluable insights and for illuminating the geographical and historical tapestry of Port Hope, Michigan. Your guidance ensures that we'll always remember the significance of this remarkable town and the volunteers serving the community and invigorating its preservation. Port Hope's transformation from a lumbering town to an agricultural powerhouse is a testament to its resilience and adaptability. Today, as the Port Hope Area Historical Society embarks on the ambitious journey of renovating the legacy lumberyard into a historical museum, they need everyone's support more than ever. To the skilled contractors, electricians, and laborers in the Port Hope area, your expertise and assistance are invaluable in bringing this vision to fruition. Please volunteer and join the Society today. Together, the community can breathe new life into this historic landmark and create a lasting legacy for future generations. As Garth shared, the history of Port Hope is a tapestry woven with tales of courage, adversity, and triumph, from the devastating forest fires of the past to the remarkable community resilience. Each chapter is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience and renewal. As the volunteers of the Port Hope Area Historical Society tirelessly work towards their goal, they embody the timeless wisdom of Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In partnership with the Pierre Marquette Railroad Museum Depot, the Port Hope Area Historical Society continues to forge ahead, preserving the past and shaping the future. As we bid farewell to this episode, let us carry forward the spirit of preservation and community solidarity that defines Port Hope's remarkable journey. Thank you for joining us on this enlightening exploration of history and heritage. You know, with the current technology allowing us all to work remotely, individuals have the flexibility to live almost anywhere in our country. What better location to consider than Port Hope, Michigan? Nestled in the scenic landscape of our nation, Port Hope boasts serene lakeside views and abundant outdoor activities throughout the year. Its close-knit community, anchored by the Port Hope Area Historical Society, offers a welcoming environment. Consider Port Hope, Michigan as a prime destination for raising a family and embracing a life enriched with tranquility, harmony, and natural beauty. For those planning their future, Port Hope, Michigan deserves serious consideration. Now, one final time, I'd like to provide the contact information for the Society. Their website is historicporthope.org. And on Facebook, you can find them at Port Hope Area History. And from there, you can use Facebook Messenger to connect with the Society. There's also a subnote of the Historic Port Hope website, which is the Gladys and R.B. Hunter Genealogy Center. And if you go to historicporthope.org/genealogy, you will get there. Now, the physical address of the Port Hope Area Historical Society is 8016 Portland Avenue, Port Hope, Michigan, 48468. Okay? And I hope you all visit, and I especially hope that you send them a donation. And you can send your donations, write a check, and send them to PHAHS, P.O. Box 133, Port Hope, Michigan, 48468. Okay? All right, now if questions occur to you and you'd like more information, please connect with the Society via the contact information I just shared. If you're a listener in the area the Society serves, or if you're a listener researching ancestors in the community the Society serves, and you're not already a member, please consider joining and supporting the Society. I hope this information helps the audience understand how valuable the Society is to the community and what kinds of excellent services they are working hard to offer to their members and the public. I want to tell you that the Port Hope Area Historical Society is truly one of our preservation oaks. By the way, lately we've been asking our guests the question, what do you think the world will look like in 100 years? It's an interesting question, and our guests have interesting thoughts about this topic. We're thinking about doing a special episode on this topic and including listener responses to this question. So if you'd like to comment and express your thoughts on what you think the world will look like in 100 years, please send them to preservationoaks@gmail.com. We'd love to see what you think, and thank you in advance for doing that. Okay, that's a wrap for this episode. Music used today is from Cymbalbird, Studio Etude, Neoclassic, Score Wizards, Pantheon Music, Me Gusta Music, Sir Saul Studio, and Scott Holmes. Microstream Radio is a registered trademark. You can visit us at www.microstreamradio.com. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted by Microstream Radio. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere without the written permission of Microstream Radio. Thanks everybody for listening. This is Sean Radcliff. We'll see you all next time on Preservation Oaks, and until then, keep on giving and keep on living the good life.